The story of the East India Company is one of the most astonishing tales of corporate power, imperial ambition, and ruthless exploitation in world history. What began as a modest trading venture in 1599 ultimately transformed into a colonial force that conquered and plundered one of the richest civilizations on earth. This is the story of how a for-profit company enslaved a subcontinent of over 200 million people, drained its wealth, shattered its industries, and laid the foundations for British rule in India. As Will Durant famously put it in The Case for India, the British conquest of India was the invasion and destruction of a high civilization by a trading company. Shashi Tharoor, in his book An Era of Darkness, echoes this sentiment. He said, "We literally paid for our own oppression. But how did a company initially granted a simple trading charter end up ruling one of the greatest empires in history?" Let's delve deep into the relentless rise of the East India Company. On December 31st, 1600, Queen Elizabeth I granted a royal charter to the East India Company, allowing it to trade in the East Indies. But this was no ordinary company. It was given extraordinary powers that would later enable it to function like a sovereign state. It could claim jurisdiction over territories, make laws, raise fortifications, wage war, hold courts, issue imprisonment, and even make foreign policy. It was essentially a state disguised as a merchant enterprise, as Edmund Burke later described it. Unlike other European trading companies, which remained primarily commercial, the East India Company had military ambitions from the outset. By the 17th century, the company had established trading settlements in Surat, Madras, and Bombay, but it was in Bengal that the company's fate would be forever changed. The Mughal Empire, once a formidable force, began to disintegrate after the death of Aurangzeb in 707. His religious policies and prolonged military campaigns had drained the empire's resources, leaving a fragmented and weakened political landscape. Several factors contributed to the company's meteoric rise. The Mughal Empire, which had been built on alliances, began to crumble after Aurangzeb. The Marathas, Rajputs, and regional Nawabs constantly fought each other, making it easier for the British to manipulate them. Nadir Shah's invasion in 1739 further destabilized the region, plundering Delhi and taking treasure worth over 500 million rupees. The British had access to modern European warfare techniques, including disciplined infantry lines, artillery barrages, and rapid musket fire. Babur's early use of gunpowder in the First Battle of Panipat had revolutionized Indian warfare, but by the 18th century, the British had far superior military technology. The British had a well-developed banking and taxation system. The East India Company was able to raise funds from wealthy investors, unlike Indian rulers who relied on unstable revenues. The East India Company was not just a business. It had direct backing from the British state, acting as a public-private partnership. The company wielded enormous influence in London, bribing politicians and securing tax breaks. The East India Company used its immense wealth to influence British politics, ensuring continued government support. In 1784, the London Chronicle listed 29 members of parliament with direct Indian connections, further entrenching the company's power. Despite alarm among Indian rulers, the company continued expanding, and it was the confrontation in Bengal that truly cemented its dominance. In 1756, Siraj Daula, the Nawab of Bengal, saw the growing influence of the East India Company as a threat. He led 70,000 troops to Calcutta, overwhelming the British forces led by Governor Roger Drake and Colonel Minchin, both of whom proved incompetent. The city fell, and Siraj renamed it Ali Nagar after Imam Ali. The Black Hole of Calcutta incident, where British prisoners allegedly suffocated in a small cell, was exaggerated and used as a propaganda to justify a counter-attack. On June 23, 1757, the fate of India was decided at Plassey. The Nawab's army had 60,000 soldiers, but the British, backed by defectors, had just 3,000 troops. Mir Jaffer, Siraj's commander, betrayed him, withdrawing his forces at the critical moment. The British, using Brown best muskets and field artillery, secured an easy victory. In the aftermath, Clive installed Mir Jaffer as the puppet Nawab of Bengal. Siraj was captured, executed, and his remains were paraded through Murshidabad. The British looted Bengal's treasury, stripping it of its vast wealth. £2.5 million transferred to England. This victory transformed the East India Company into a military and political power, marking the beginning of British rule in India. Economist Angus Madison estimated that before British rule, India accounted for 23% of global GDP. By the time the British left in 1947, India's GDP share had fallen to just 3.8%. India's shipbuilding and steel industries, which were world-renowned during the Mughal period, were deliberately dismantled by the British. Urdu and Persian, once dominant, were replaced by English as the administrative language. The cultural synthesis of Indo-Islamic traditions was weakened under British rule, as divide and rule policies exacerbated religious divisions. The East India Company began as a trading entity but ended up enslaving an entire nation. Its success was built on military conquest, political manipulation, economic exploitation, and sheer brutality. As Leo Tolstoy wrote in 1908, a commercial company enslaved a nation comprising 200 million people. After the Indian Rebellion of 1857, power was transferred to the British Crown, but the damage had already been done. Shashi Tharoor aptly summarizes the impact. He said, "We literally paid for our own oppression." The story of the East India Company is a grim reminder of how corporate greed, backed by state power, can reshape history. If you found this deep dive into history insightful, subscribe to the Knowledge Compass for more videos on geopolitics and history. See you in the next video.